Amanda, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am doing great, Annie. Thank you so much for having me.
We're thrilled to have you here. Now, Amanda, I know you've had a tremendous amount of success in the real estate space over the last several years, starting first with a duplex, which is exactly how I started out as well, and then moving into mobile home parks, which is what you're focused on. How did you then, okay, so you're getting these, you're like, okay, for the amount of work I'm putting in, I'm only getting a couple $100s a month. Did you think about like, oh, we'll just buy more? Or were you like, okay, this path isn't right, we're going to pivot? And then how did you, of all the different possibilities, why mobile homes?
So we did the latter of, hey, we could keep buying a whole bunch, but I could quickly run the numbers of how many we'd have to buy and how long it would take. And it just didn't make as
Yeah.
much sense to us. Now, I had heard from a guy who I deeply respect, Bill Cook. He is such a smart, creative deal structurer. And in 2019, he was telling me about something called a Lonnie Deal, which is
Hmm.
where you buy a mobile home, just like a single family home from somebody who needs to sell it. So you buy it for a good price and you turn around and you sell it to a family who's going to buy it and live there. And you carry that note. You're the bank for them. And so we did some of these.
Oh,
The interest rates are
interesting.
very high on those. It's very
Mm.
approachable. You only need a handful of thousands of dollars to buy one of these. So it's a very approachable investment with really high returns. So we did a handful of those and it went well. We understood the space. We really like the macroeconomics of mobile home parks and affordable housing, which there is just an ever growing shortage of affordable housing. So in 2020, we bought our first mobile home park. We actually bought it the first week of April 2020. So we went under
Oh,
contract in
wow.
January and bought it the first week of April. Like the entire world changed in that time frame. We were freaking out.
Wow.
Well, my husband wasn't freaking out. I'm the numbers one. So I was freaking out.
Yeah.
Ran the numbers like 50 times.
Yeah.
Half of the park would have to not pay us before we could not make the mortgage. I'm like, okay,
Okay.
this is
Okay.
going to work. And that's how we got into mobile home parks.
Yeah. Oh, I can imagine with that timing. And it must have been because often, the residents of mobile home parks tend to be more vulnerable population as far as it comes to, service jobs and things like that. So at a time like that, when a lot of people were having to hold off, or there was a pause or a hiatus, or they were getting laid off, it must have been. So how did it turn out? Tell us, so you got that one. How did it
Oh,
go?
it went great. So it turns out the residents of this park were heavily into processing of meat, which never shut down because that was, a very important thing, and
Right.
landscaping, which was an outdoor thing, or construction, which was outdoor. So
Oh.
they never ended up really losing their jobs for the
Hmm.
most part. And as you know, there was a lot of money given out to individuals for a long time.
Yeah.
So we didn't miss a single rent payment on that
Wow.
park for years. I think we just evicted our
Wow.
first ever tenant about 6 months ago. So
Wow.
it took a long time. And honestly, residents of mobile home parks tend to be pretty sticky. So they're
Mm.
lower income,
Yeah.
but the the rent they're paying is so low that it's a
Yeah.
very approachable amount. It's not like the $1,500 a month,
Yeah.
for a standard
Right.
rentals. So yeah,
Mhm.
it ends up being that we have
Yeah.
very high payment rates and very low turnover.
Yeah. Okay. So you mentioned their rent is low. And so for somebody who may know nothing about mobile home parks, I know there's different models. So sometimes you own the home, sometimes you don't, sometimes they're renting. So give us kind of the 101 on how mobile home parks work and how or this particular one worked.
Yeah. So there are, like you were saying, Annie, two different ways you can run a mobile home park as the owner. There's a tenant owned home model, and that's where the tenants own their own homes and they pay you lot rent for the right to keep their home connected to your land and your infrastructure. So it's connected to water and sewer and electrical, and they pay you a couple $100s a month for the right to keep their home there. But they own everything inside of the home. So if they have to replace carpet or paint, there's a leaking toilet, that is on them as the owner of the home, not on the owner of the park. Then there's the other side, which is park owned homes. And that's like a standard rental. The park owner owns the home as well. And then the residents pay typically more money to live in the home as a standard rental. And then they don't take care of the paint or something leaking and just be treated like any other single family home rental.
Got it. And so which type was the one that you bought?
The first one we bought was all tenant owned homes. And we prefer that model. It's more streamlined. It's a little bit easier to scale. You don't have to have, the same level of handyman. You can sort of just have a manager making sure everybody's collecting rent. But some investors really prefer the park owned home model because you do get more rent coming in. And so especially for smaller parks, that could be the model that you go with. And it really just depends on each person. And we have a park that has a lot of park owned homes in it, and we're actually going to keep them as park owned homes. And depending on how they're valued, a lot of times it can be beneficial to keep them as park owned homes when you go to sell with a broker, which is the reason we're doing it in this case.
Or what are you looking for when you're looking at, you mentioned you look at lots of deals. So how do you know if something is right for you?
So we want it to be 20 or more lots. The more, the better. Typically with these off-market sellers, 20 to 40, 20 to 50 is where you're really going to get most of them. The brokers have really latched on to all the bigger parks, of course. And I want, septic is fine. I don't love septic as well, unless we can move it to city infrastructure. I won't buy a wastewater treatment plant, which is like a private system for treating sewage. I need the population to be at least not declining. It doesn't have to be the best metro for a mobile home park. It's not as critical because of the population that's being served, but there do need to be several core job industries, population not declining. And, we look at how old the homes are and we assume there's going to be a lot of work. A lot of these are neglected over time. So you're going to have to go put a good amount of money in when you buy it. But those are really what I'm trying to get is, what the infrastructure is what makes a mobile home park more valuable than land. So what is the infrastructure and who pays for it? How old is it? Those are the things I'm trying to understand. And most importantly, the number of lots, but even more important than that, the number of paying residents. They'll just say, oh yeah, it's 40 lots. I'm like, okay, that's good. How many homes are there? How many residents are actually paying? Because that is not the same as the number of lots.
Do you find, do you talk to some mom and pop owners who have like their expenses and things like written down on a napkin and like,
oh yeah. Oh, we don't get P&Ls, and that's good. If there's like a full on P&L, I know they're preparing for a broker. Like they're just not our seller. I'm like, oh, you don't know? That's perfect. We know how much it's going to cost for trash. Like, I don't even need you to tell me. So this is great.
Yeah.